So I'm John Kane, and I welcome you to Let's Talk Native on this Tuesday, October 8th. While this program may not provide a path to spiritual enlightenment, we do start, in some cases, continue in conversations. Anyway, we don't do prayers and we don't do buffalo speeches. We take a tough look at our history, oppression, and survival. We talk about culture, the arts, politics, and identity, and we do step on a few toes along the way. But our real goal here is to bring people together by breaking down what separates us. We take on the false narratives and provide critical thinking to all that's being heaped upon us, and we do it all right here from the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation. So let's talk Native. But first, let me remind people that our audio streams at www.letstalknative.com, and we stream live video of the show on our Facebook group pages via Facebook Live. We take the audio of the show and we put it up on SoundCloud, which puts it out to all your favorite podcast platforms. And we take the video and we put it up on our YouTube channel, which is Let's Talk Native TV. And I encourage you to subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and share and comment on what we talk about here. Look, I know some of the things that I talk about here are not the widely held opinions on some of these issues. And while I'm not necessarily trying to change the opinion, I am trying to enter perhaps some other thoughts into the conversation. I am the host and producer of the show, and I'm joined here in studio by Jake Proud, who is managing our audio and our video. All right, I want to talk FedRec. I posted it was a bit of a meme, but it was also an explanation to the meme, and then all the meme was essentially a quote from what I'd written. So let me first read what I wrote and put it up on Facebook. That got a pretty good response, and I was pleased that it got a response, and perhaps a little surprised that it got the response. But this is what I posted today or yesterday on Facebook. I said, just to clarify an issue related to federal recognition of a tribe, band, or nation of Indians. The U.S. federal government, through its Department of Interior, lists 573 federally recognized tribes. They define a federally recognized tribe as a tribe, band, or nation of Indians subordinate to the laws of the United States and under U.S. jurisdiction. This definition comes out of the Indian Reorganization Act, or otherwise known as the IRA, of 1934. Now, to be clear, the overwhelming majority of Native people who the federal government claims as recognized never accepted this definition of themselves. The overwhelming majority of the 573 on the list never pursued, applied, or asked for this federal designation. Most of the list comes out of the manipulation of identifying Native people, first out of the obligation owed to Native people for being screwed out of their land and resources and other costs imposed on Native people through over 2 centuries of genocide. This FedRec system, and I call it FedRec, it's kind of a coined phrase, I guess, and FEDWRECK. This FedRec system is now the hoop many are forced to jump through for funding and land rights that are now framed as welfare or grants rather than the defaulted upon debts of the United States. The federal government does not define Native people for our purposes, but for theirs. We should never depend on their recognition to define or validate us. There should be nothing more demeaning than to call ourselves members of a federally recognized tribe. That's the quote that I used for the meme, if you haven't seen it. We predate the existence of the United States and their bullshit FedRec system. Of course they recognize us. Denying such or framing us beneath them defines them, not us. So that's the post that I put up on Facebook yesterday, and I got a pretty good response. Hundreds of likes and reactions, almost 100 shares, and it got shared across a lot of different places. And so that's the reason that's really the reason I want to talk about FedRec in general, because I did have to qualify a few things along the way. So let me get back into some of that. Trying to get myself situated here so I can look for your comments as they come in. All right. So as I explained, FedRec, or the federal recognition, as again, and they created a definition for what Native people were in 1934 because they were really trying to solve a problem that they have never been able to tackle. Look, we weren't a part of the original U.S. Constitution. We were specifically put in the same category as foreign nations. So in the Commerce Clause, where it says Congress shall have the power to regulate commerce in and among several states with foreign nations and with Indian tribes, not of, with Indian tribes, you can see that we're put on parallel with foreign nations. In the Treaty Clause, when it says the President of the United States had the power to negotiate treaties with the advice and consent of the Senate, it was with treaties with foreign nations and Indian tribes. Again, we were not put into the same category. We're put in the same category, I should say, as with foreign nations. In the Apportionment Clause of congressional representation and taxation, they were clear to say that that their apportionment, so their population, was not including Indians not taxed, which essentially meant Native people. I mean, because almost none of us were essentially a taxable people under the laws of the United States. And there's no real place that they ever could officially change that. I mean, there's no date, there's no event, there's no surrender, there's no treaty, there's nothing that says, okay, we're yours now. And so knowing that they recognized us as a distinct people, or peoples, let's be clear, because there were many of us. I mean, I know they throw this number, 573 federally recognized tribes, and we'll talk a little bit about what that means and what they're calling a tribe also. But they clearly recognize us as a distinct people, different from them, not included in their government, not a part of their government, but as an entity that had to be dealt with as sovereign nations. In spite of doctrine of discovery and all that other stuff, it's clear what their language was. And as they negotiated treaties, they recognized, the Six Nations in particular, they recognized us as a distinct people with land that was not claimed by the United States, with land that they would never claim until we would ever chose to sell it to them. That's their language, not ours. That's their language. So they clearly recognized who we were. And I'm not just speaking for Six Nations. It went across all of the native peoples for the most part. And so that's what they recognized at the, in the 18th century, going into the 19th century. There was still, when they were even when they were trying to do the Removal Act and move Native peoples west of the Mississippi, when it came to the Seneca Nation and some of the Six Nations, it was clear that they recognized as distinct people. When the Seneca said, "Wait a second, if we did go to Kansas, how would that land be held?" And the United States made overtures to the Seneca Nation and said, "Well, that land would be yours, just like the land we're asking you to swap out now." And the United States will never claim it. It'll never be part of U.S. territory. It'll never be a state. It would be Seneca. So they knew, even in the 1830s, that the Senecas were, and of course the other Six Nations were distinct, and other Native peoples were distinct, and they had to treat us as such. Now, when you move into the post-Civil War era, when they passed the 14th Amendment, which, the 13th Amendment to end slavery, and the 14th Amendment that would designate all people born in the United States and under U.S. jurisdiction as U.S. citizens, they knew that didn't include us because we weren't under the jurisdiction. So in the 1860s, in the late 19th century, they know, even as they're trying to grant citizenship to former slaves, people who clearly were subjugated in all manner of life by the United States as slaves, as they were attempting, and they sure didn't do it in the 1860s, but as they were attempting to make some changes to what was a citizen. I mean, they weren't giving black people the right to vote, but they were calling them citizens finally. But they still weren't calling us. And how do I know that? Because in 1924, so again, another 50 years later, the United States passes the Indian Citizenship Act. And there they declare that all Native people born within the continental United States are hereby declared citizens, provided this act doesn't violate any property issues and the like. But that was a declaration that we didn't ask for. This wasn't us asking for citizenship. So they knew that didn't fly. And how do I know the 1924 Indian Citizenship Act didn't accomplish what the United States intended for it to accomplish? Because in 1934, they're still trying to define what a Native people. So that's when they come up with this definition that says an Indian, a federally recognized Indian, is a tribe, band, or nation of Indians subordinate to the laws of the United States and under U.S. jurisdiction. I mean, that's their language. It's not ours. So that's what in 1934 they were considering a federally recognized Indian or tribe. Now, it seems crazy because, in other words, in 1934, there were still Native people who were not being recognized as subordinate to the laws of the United States. Now, that didn't mean that they weren't Native. That means that they weren't recognized as under U.S. jurisdiction. And many people still existed that way. Now, how do I know that? Because today, even today, when any Native peoples are trying to reacquire lost lands or lands that were, however they were lost, fraud, theft, whatever, as they applied to use what they called the fee to trust system. Now, of course, the only ones who can do this are the quote unquote federally recognized tribes. But the United States says, well, but you had to be federally recognized, and you had to be under U.S. jurisdiction in 1934 to use this. Otherwise, you can't reacquire lost lands. So by the way they're applying this 1934 rule, it is clear that not all Native people were under U.S. jurisdiction at the time. And so what they're saying, if you weren't under our jurisdiction then, you can't get your land back now, which is, of course, is ludicrous. But this is, the contradictions and showing the glaring holes in how they were trying to frame Native people. So today, again, we still go back to that 1934 rule, because today they are saying that a federally recognized tribe or peoples they have to be a tribe, band, or nation of Indians subordinate to the laws of the United States and under U.S. jurisdiction. Now, they claim that there's 573 of these federally recognized tribes. Now, for one thing, if you look at the list of these 573, some of these aren't even, they're not even distinct Native people. Some of these are just a community. I mean, for one thing, the Mohawk Nation is not a federally recognized tribe, which I'm okay with. The St. Regis tribe is a federally recognized tribe. They're the only Mohawks under this so-called federal recognition. Now, most of them, the Gunyagahaga, most of the Mohawk people in Akwesasne or any place else would never accept that definition. And in fact, even though the St. Regis tribe is federally recognized, their constituency, the Mohawk people who live in Akwesasne, would reject that definition. The Seneca Nation is a federally recognized tribe. They're on the list, but the Seneca Nation never asked for that designation, and they never agreed with it. They never said, "Oh yeah, we're subordinate to the laws of the United States." And before I get too far into this, I know one of the things that always gets said: "Of course you're subordinate to the laws of the United States. Of course you're not sovereign. You get federal funds." Well, so does Israel, folks. So you try that with some of these other countries before you turn around and try it on us. And you know what? Israel, United States has no debt to Israel. United States has a huge debt to Native people, in every place from Hawaii to Alaska to Florida to Maine. So make no mistake about it. The funding that the United States and Canada, for that matter, put up for Native people, although they're trying to frame it now as charity, as some sort of goodwill, no, it's debt. It is debt. The United States hasn't even, and I'm not even talking about reparations, because they're not even close to addressing that. Just debt for having unlawfully or otherwise ceded lands, or seized lands. Most of the lands that they claim, I mean, and you hear this all the time in Hawaii, but you'll hear it other places, unceded lands. The United States is claiming them, but they have no legal right to do so. I mean, the Black Hills are another example. We can look at land claims all over the place where the United States violated their own laws in order to gain access and occupancy, illegal occupancy on native lands. I mean, that's just a matter of fact. So when you see, again, what this manipulation is, I think it's important that people realize that just because some entities, and again, the names are terrible. Even the Seneca Nation, calling themselves the Seneca Nation of Indians. I mean, come on. For one thing, if you wanted to use our language, it would be Onondaga. But even if you were going to use the word Seneca, which is not our word, and not a Seneca word, then why not just stop at Seneca Nation? I mean, not that solves the problem. I mean, Mohawks. Why? I mean, the St. Regis tribe of Mohawks. I mean, they even threw the Mohawk part. It used to be just the St. Regis tribe, SRT. now it's SRMT. I mean, come on, St. Regis Mohawk tribe. And if you go across, you look at this list again of 500, you're going to see every entity. In New Mexico, the Pueblos, for instance, everyone is a Pueblo. I mean, you've got rancherias, you've got all these names that are associated with forts, with with either these Spanish names or these French names, La Coudray, Coeur d'Alene. I mean, those aren't our words, but these are the words that they have listed on the paper, and so we accept that. Cheyenne River Sioux, the Cheyenne River Sioux. The Cheyenne, no, I mean, am I even good? No, I'm sorry, it's not even. But a lot of these Lakota territories, they go by these names, and they accepted the fact that the United States is calling them Sioux, and that's not even their word, and that word is an insult. So when you look through all of this stuff, I mean, all the ones that are called tribes, all the ones that are called and again, I think the word tribe is a huge insult. Look how it's used by the talking heads on TV and radio, on the internet, wherever. Every time they talk about something that's tribal, it's derogatory. Tribalism is an insult. Oh yeah, there you see another example of tribalism. Yeah, they make it sound like it's a breakdown in human sophistication and human civilization. That's when they use the word tribe. So why would we call ourselves that when we know that that's how they're using it? Now, they can claim, well, we don't mean it. When we talk about you, we don't mean it in that insulting way. You know what? Bullshit. They do too. So when we use these words that aren't ours, and, one of the guys who posted on this says, we should be using our own language. And I agree. But even if we're not going to use, if we're going to use words that we expect the rest of the world to recognize and understand, one thing, we can teach them our words. Let's be clear. We can teach everybody to say ongwe ongwe. They don't have to say Indian. They don't have to say Native American or First Nation, or half of these other, ridiculous expressions or colloquialisms that they use to describe who we are. I mean, I use the word native to be more benign in, even indigenous. I mean, as I wear my indigenous hat. I mean, the problem I have with that word is that it is framed within the context of colonialism. The international definition of indigenous suggests that we are the descendants of a sovereign people, descendants of an original people, like we aren't the original people anymore. And you know what? I call bullshit on that too. So I agree. We should use more appropriate language, but certainly we should get rid of the insulting language. I mean, the misnomers like words Indian, the insulting words like Sioux or tribe. No, let's just get rid of it. I'm not even crazy about the word nation, because that's one of their words and it has connotation to it. So, I mean, again, I would much rather say that I'm Gunya Gahaga, or that I don't need to say I'm an enrolled member of the Mohawk Nation or the St. Regis. No, I can just say I'm Mohawk. You can just say I'm Gunya Gahaga. Same with Senecas. You can just say you're Seneca. You can just say you're Onondawaga or Haudenosaunee or Ongwe Ongwe. We don't have to use their words all the time. And we can teach others our words so they understand. Because when we say Ongwe Ongwe, we don't mean just that we're, the color of our skin. That definition comes from being a real human being forever. And forever means in both directions. It means that we have a past and we have a future. And that future and that past have us bound to our land and to creation around us, to the place that we were created. So it ties us to all of the things that our ancestors were tied to. That's why, the idea of buying and selling land and moving all around. Look, I'm not saying some Native people don't do it, but what really defines a Native person is somebody who has a sense of place and belonging to a place, a homeland. And I'm not just talking about, a 1 acre parcel here. I'm talking about the general sense that we are bound to Turtle Island, to the area, to this continent, to our homelands. So that's the reason we should be using these words, is because they don't They aren't just a label for who, for who we are. There's a definition, and there's identity associated with that stuff. See, and identity is a big issue here, because there is the problem with this whole federal recognition issue. Too many Native people are using, like I said, I think it should be insulting to refer to yourself as a member of a federally recognized tribe. Because their definition, for only calling yourself a tribe is insulting enough, but their definition suggests that you're under it, you're beneath them. And if you believe that, then by all means, then you might as well just call yourself an American or a Canadian. But if you are really dedicated to who you are, your identity as Ungwe, as a Native person, regardless of what group of Native peoples you're from, if that is who your identity is, then don't use a federal designation for that. We need to look, language and words matter. And I don't mean just, Native languages, Seneca, Mohawk, Onondaga, Gunyagahaga. I don't mean just Native languages. I just mean the words that we use even within a language. They matter because they mean something. I remember Stephen Newcomb wrote an article in Indian Country Today, and he said, were we tribes before white people came here? Of course we weren't, because we didn't use that concept. And again, whatever the derogatory meaning of the word tribe is. So when he asked that question, he was asking it rhetorically. He knew what the answer was. He said, of course we weren't. We didn't have those kinds of ways of defining who we were, or as a group or as a people. Most of our words, Gunyagahaga means the people from the land of Flint. Onondaga, the people from the land of the mountains or the big hills. Onyotaaga, the people from where the stones stand. And so whether you say Dene or Anishinaabe, all of these words often, they all usually say something like that the people from a place. It describes the people and where who their mother is, a description of their mother, meaning the land that they're from. So when we say Gunyagahaga, people of the land of Flint, we mean that's the part of our mother where the Flint was prevalent. So whether we were talking about a marshy area or a hilly area, or a place where the sun rises or a place where the sun sets, or whether it's Black Hills or Everglades, wherever it is, these the word for the people who call themselves Tuscarora, the word that really described them was Katantawaga, and it meant the people of the sunken pine or the cypress, of the land where you had those swampy areas where the trees were rooted beneath the water. So it's all descriptive, so we always refer to ourselves as the people, not the nation, not the tribe, not the confederacy even. Those are words that that we either adopted or imposed upon us. So again, these 573 Fed-rect tribes, some of these are just communities. They wouldn't be looked at as nations or whatever else. Some of these designations had to do with where the federal government put people. Whether it was the mission, St. Regis, that was a church mission. So the St. Regis Mohawk tribe, that name comes from a church, or from the church, the church associated with St. Regis. And if you look at all of San Carlos, that's all of these. So instead of just being the Apache, it's San Carlos Apache. So these are some of the difficulties in the words that we allowed them to attach to us as labels. And worse than the labels is the designation. Now, look, the federal government claims there's 573 federally recognized tribes. There are many, many Native peoples who are not federally recognized for a variety of reasons. Some are in pursuit of such. And why? So why would somebody want to be labeled as a tribe, band, or nation of Indians supported the laws of the United States? Well, part of the whole thing is they get laced with all these other problems. I heard somebody on one of my posts said something along the lines, well, we pursued federal recognition because we were being lumped in with Cherokee and we're Lenape. So they saw the federal recognition process as a way to distinguish them from other Native people. It wasn't that they were trying to gain distinction as a Native people. They didn't like how the federal government was labeling them. I mean, man, what a sad way to solve that problem. And others are in pursuits of land claims or federal funding, for programs. And of course, when we talk about this federal funding, and people say, well, yeah, see, you're going to be dependent on the federal government. Yeah, but the federal government owes us many of these. I mean, think about the way the clinics work. I mean, here in Seneca Nation, if you're going to be serviced by the clinic here in Cattaraugus, you either have to provide insurance, your own insurance or your employer's insurance, or they want to run you through the state Medicare program, Medicaid program. And so it's not the Indian Health Services that's footing the bill. It's not the federal government who has the responsibility because they took that responsibility on. One of the things that was worked out in many of these land sessions had to do with health, education, and welfare. So that's been passed on. So now we look like a bunch of welfare recipients. And it shouldn't be treated that way. This isn't welfare. This is an obligation by the federal government. And the problem is we buy into it, and we start viewing ourselves that way, that we're just a bunch of welfare recipients, and that's bullshit. It's not true. I mean, when we're fighting for land rights, we have to fight the federal government for what we do on our lands. How bizarre is that? And then we ask them to legislate for us, to provide us with some freedoms on our lands. I mean, really? Why? Because we're federally recognized tribes? We want them to legislate to protect our women and our children because their laws allow. Apparently, their laws must allow for our kids to be kidnapped and sold and obviously put in these prison schools and put in these adoption programs, foster care. Apparently, the laws allow our women to be murdered and kidnapped and rendered missing. But so I mean, this gets into some of the things I've talked about in previous shows about our need to step up. But this and look, we're at the bottom of the hour, so we're going to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk about what Hawaii is going through because they had a very unique situation, and I'm going to show you some distinction. For instance, from what the Shinnecock had to go through for federal recognition versus what the Obama administration and others, state senators from Hawaii, U.S. senators from Hawaii, were trying to create a streamlined process to turn Hawaiians into Indians. We'll talk about that when we come back. Look, this is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native. We're talking Fed Rec, and we got more to talk about when we come back. We'll be back after this. All right, thanks for coming back. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native. Hey, I want to thank our my sponsors. I want to thank Ross and Holly John and the RJE family of businesses. I want to thank Eric White and ERW Enterprise and the good folks at at Grand River Enterprises and NWS for supporting this program. Look, I also want to give a shout out to a few individuals, including my friends VJ and Jabe and Harry from from down close to the city area. Harry from Puspatuk, I should say, for helping for making a contribution for a specific need that I have at this point. Look, before I get back into it, I do have to give a bit of an announcement. As many of you know, I do 2 shows a week here from Seneca Territory, and then I travel to New York to do a radio show on a legendary station called WBAI. And when I say legendary, it's because it has been really the example of what people would call progressive radio. Much of their programming was like free form radio, kind of a style that I was drawn to, and it's a style that I use for this show and for my show down there. I was doing what was at one time a 2-hour talkback show. Now it's a 1-hour talkback show. But on Monday, WBAI is is a community radio station. It's owned by a corporation that has a not-for-profit corporation that has 4 other stations. One in Houston, one in Washington, I think 2 or 3 in 2 in California, I guess. So that 5 altogether. Well, this company called Pacifica shut down WBAI on Monday. They locked the doors, and they fired all the staff, and they canceled all local programming, locally produced programming, including my show. And they began airing just selected shows from their other stations in Pacifica. Now, WBAI is a station that is usually at some level of financial difficulty all the time. Look, the media market has changed. WBAI has not responded well to coming up with other funding strategies. They are listener-supported radio, and frankly, the listeners aren't quite there the way they used to be. So this was the rationale for Pacifica Corp to shut them down. But apparently, the folks at WBAI managed to get an injunction or a temporary restraining order. And so it looks like Pacifica hasn't successfully done this takeover quite yet. Now, I didn't know if I was going to do a show in New York this week or not. I know they're still working out some of the details. So I will not be in New York this Thursday, but I don't know about next Thursday. So it is entirely possible that the last show that I did on WBAI was the last show I'll do on WBAI, but we'll find out. My plan is to still do a show here out of my studio on Thursday. I still plan to do that show, and I'm going to see if I can work out between Jake and I, if we can work out, perhaps a phone system or something like that. If in the absence of having a venue in New York, and I am working on a few, perhaps some solutions there too with other producers. But I will still do. I'll Facebook live stream. I'll put this out on my. On streaming live on my website as a podcast, as a YouTube video. We're still going to try to do a Thursday show, regardless of what's happening at WBAI. But I do want people to be aware that there's trouble. There's trouble at WBAI, and I got to tell you, I love doing a show in New York. I love the place that our studio is located is at 388 Atlantic Avenue. It's where the Brooklyn Commons. The name of the building is the Brooklyn Commons. I've done events there. I've screened films. I've had musical guests like Jeff Doreen and others, Young Jubway. Different people have come in to perform. I've had speakers. Like I said, we've done a variety of things. We've hosted some major events on environment there, and it's something that I frankly will continue to do. I mean, even if I don't have a venue in New York to do a radio show of some sort, I will probably still continue to do events. In fact, I got an event coming up on the 18th at Verso Bookstore, Verso Books in Brooklyn. My friend Jeremiah Hosea, we've got an event planned, and it's a conversation with John Kane, and with some music, just a real solid DJ from the Brooklyn area who's going to provide music. So we're looking forward to that, and that's Friday evening on, like I said, on the 18th. So I'm still going to do events in New York. But there's trouble at WBAI, so we'll see how this plays out. So I just want to let people know that I know some of the folks who listen to this show catch my shows in New York and vice versa. So it's the best explanation I can give so far. So we'll see what comes of it, and I'll keep you updated on that. Okay, so I wanted to talk about FedRec. Now, I know I have friends down in Long Island, not just the Poospatucks, Harry Wallace, who again is a supporter of the show, but in Shinnecock, I've got friends there. Lance Gums, who is is a friend of mine. But I've been covering the story on the Shinnecocks, putting up what they call a monument, but essentially an electronic billboard, and the white folk losing their mind because they think it detracts from their $1 million mansions in the Hamptons. It's just kind of funny. But the Shinnecock are a federally recognized tribe. Now, they didn't initially begin trying to become federally recognized. What they were trying to do was assert some land claims issues and some land use issues, and it kind of forced them into the what they call the recognition process, the federal acknowledgement process, which is ridiculous all by itself. This process is such a monumental task that the Shinnecock spent over $3 million. No, I'm sorry, I may have this completely wrong. It might be $30 million. I think it's close to, I may have my numbers mixed up, but they spent a small fortune, and I think it was $30 million, $33 million, to pursue federal recognition. So what happens is you end up spending so much money that even if you didn't want to do gaming, you realize that gaming may be the only way to bail yourselves out of the debt you got into pursuing federal recognition. So even if you weren't pursuing federal recognition to do gaming, you almost have to do gaming to pursue federal recognition. It's that absurd. So, and there are hundreds of groups of Native peoples who have been pushed in this situation where they're either involved in this long 30-year process to become federally recognized, and tens of millions of dollars, sometimes which never happens, or when they do get federally recognized, they'll find out that they pulled that 1934 rule and says, yeah, we're going to recognize you now. We should have recognized you before, but in 1934 we didn't recognize you as a tribe, band, or nation of Indians subordinate to the laws of the United States, so you can't reclaim lost land. We don't care how you lost it. We don't care who you lost it to. We don't care that it's right there. We don't care if you're still living on it. If we don't consider it Indian land, we're not gonna consider it Indian land because we didn't consider you ours in 1934. I mean, this is the craziness of all this. All right, so now juxtapose that against what's happening in Hawaii. Now, Hawaii is an illegally occupied territory. The United States unlawfully and illegally occupied Hawaii. They essentially committed a bloodless coup against the Hawaiian Kingdom, where a bunch of white men said, "Oh, the Hawaiian Kingdom doesn't exist. We're the Republic of Hawaii, and we want to be annexed." Now, the President of the United States knew this was a crock of crap, so he wouldn't submit. He wouldn't even. He not only wouldn't agree to this annexation treaty with this the slew of white men claiming to be the government of Hawaii. He rejected it out of hand. So, and this was Grover Cleveland from Buffalo, I might add. Not the greatest president in the world, but in this case, he understood what was being attempted. So when he gets replaced by McKinley, who also had some fame here in Buffalo, well, not the kind he wanted, but when McKinley comes in, they said, no, we don't have an annexation treaty, but here's what we're going to do. We're just going to pass a joint resolution of Congress, which is illegal, to claim Hawaii. So through a joint resolution of Congress, and a joint resolution is not a law. I mean, a resolution is not a law. To pass an annexation of a new land, the Senate needs a 2/3 majority. You have to have a signed treaty, which they didn't have, and you have to have 2/3 of the Senate confirm that treaty. None of that happened. Instead, through a simple majority of the House and the Senate, the United States just claimed Hawaii, or certain lands of Hawaii, which, again, illegal, absolutely unconstitutional under the laws of the United States. I mean, but that's what they did. And of course, this was at the turn of the 20th century, and then in 1959 they make it the 50th state. They pass it into law, not through a joint resolution of Congress either. They declare Hawaii the 50th state. Now, so what about the Hawaiians? What about the native people, the Kanaka Maoli? Now, they were opposed to this. I mean, they signed what they called the Kue petitions. They were very, very outspoken. The queen, I mean, Hawaii was a kingdom. They had a queen. She protested. She's the one who petitioned Grover Cleveland and others. And in fact, Grover Cleveland agreed. Oh yeah, we need to restore the Hawaiian kingdom, but we need some assurances that you're not going to execute those who committed treason against you. So Queen Liliuokalani agreed, but then it never happened. Cleveland gets voted out. McKinley gets in, and of course they're all hawks, and they already have designs on what they're going to do in the South Pacific, and they know grabbing Hawaii it was a strategic location for not only to grab Hawaii all by itself, but they knew that was a foothold into creating more aggression against Japan and anybody else who stood in the way in the South Pacific. So that's what the design of the United States was. They were under McKinley and then Teddy Roosevelt. This was American imperialism, the birthplace of American imperialism beyond what took place, with their quote unquote manifest destiny and westward expansion through native territories. Now, man, they were stretching their legs well beyond the U.S. territories. So that's what they were after. So, but again, what about the Hawaiian people? What about the Kanaka Maoli? So they rejected all this, and by the time you get into more contemporary times in the 1970s and that kind of stuff, now you're starting to get some acknowledgement about what transpired. You get into the Clinton administration, and he passes again a joint resolution of Congress apologizing for what the United States did to the Hawaiian kingdom and to the Hawaiian people. And then they start figuring, well, what can we do for these people that we wronged so badly? They sure as hell weren't thinking about giving Hawaii back. Among the things that started being kicked around was the idea of looking at that the native Hawaiian population as another Indian tribe. It would be a huge Indian tribe. It would be larger than the Navajo. It would be, between 500,000 and 1 million people. And of course, if they made it one tribe, it'd be huge. Or they were going to do like they do with these 573 federally recognized tribes, create these little divisions and try to cut up the Hawaiian people into a dozen little tribes of Hawaiians. So how did the Hawaiian people feel about that? They hated it. The Obama administration was trying to pass a streamlined, a fast-track process to federally recognize Native Hawaiians, the Kanaka Maoli, as an Indian tribe. That's what the Obama administration was. So he sends his Interior Department, and at first it was John Kerry. John Kerry was the Secretary of State. He sent his Interior Department, but those people who are still calling themselves the Kingdom of Hawaii, they said, hell no. Don't send us the Interior Department. Send us John Kerry. We're a foreign nation. We need to talk to your State Department, not your Interior Department. And they were saying, hell no, don't send the Interior Department. But the Obama administration sent the Interior Department. Sally Jewell, who was the Secretary of the Interior at the time. They hosted a series of meetings all around the islands. And I don't remember. There might have been a dozen, maybe 15, and including a few on the continent and in areas that were where these Hawaiian civic clubs existed, where pockets of Hawaiian people who live on the continent would go. Most of them, by the way, were being held at quote-unquote Indian casinos, which, by the way, a Hawaiian tribe could not have because as far as the federal laws go, if the state doesn't have gaming, then the tribes can't have gaming. So even that was kind of crap. But so all of these hearings that they had, Hawaiian people came out in huge numbers. And the overwhelming sentiment expressed at these things was, hell no. Get rid of your Interior Department. You're not going to make us an Indian tribe. You're not going to do to us what you've done to Native people on the continent. That's what the overwhelming sentiment was. And there's videos of it. You can find them online. You can find, I was posting a bunch of them at the time. These hearings that were taking place, place after place after place. And I'm talking about people who had to ride on really rough roads because, Hawaii isn't just Honolulu. It's a lot of backwoods areas, a lot of places where the roads are, sometimes seasonally passable. And yet people were going out of their way to show up at these hearings sometimes being very, very vocal against the Interior Department representatives. In fact, the Interior Department started feeling so threatened, they were showing up with security forces because they felt like their lives were in jeopardy, or they were at risk of bodily harm. So, in spite of all that, after they do all these hearings, they say this is the crap that the Obama administration did. They said, well, now we'll receive written commentary on this idea of fast tracking federal recognition of a Hawaiian tribe. And so all these form letters got sent in. I mean, and they're just electronic, so nobody knows if there's anybody really behind them or not. It's not like the physical bodies that show up at a hearing. So when the Obama administration puts a report out on the response they got to creating this fast track system, they said the overwhelming response was favorable towards creating this thing, and they completely ignored the hearings and only referred to the written responses they got, which oftentimes weren't even written. They were just a form letter that somebody attached their names to, or somebody had their names attached to. Regardless of it, it didn't happen. There's still the fight going on in Hawaii. Two fights actually, because there's the fight over trying to protect Mauna Kea from having this $1 billion 30-meter telescope built on what they call their sacred mountain. And there's still the fight going on about the restoration and the acknowledgement of the Hawaiian Kingdom. A fight that, when taken to the international community, I mean, it gets very, very good reception. But how do you take on the United States? When the United States seems to dictate international policy. But that's where we're at. But the reason I mentioned the Hawaiians, because I wanted to show an example of people who say, hell no. You're not going to put us in that box. You're not going to put us in this box of a tribe, band, or nation of Indians subordinate to the laws of the United States. Now, again, I've got to be clear. The vast majority of those 573 federally recognized tribes don't accept the definition that the United States uses. The problem is those that do depend on that federal recognition and wear it as their label, or as their validation. I mean, one of the worst experiences I ever had was meeting somebody who, I mean, for all the world, looked like a white man, but he was a lawyer, and he claimed to be Cherokee, and he walks into the room and he pulls out his tribal ID and he throws it on the table and he goes, "Just so you know where I'm coming from." And so this is his enrollment card to a federally recognized tribe, and I'm thinking, this is how you identify yourself? With a card? That's not how Native people identify. We talk to each other. We get to know each other. We want to learn about family. We want to know about place. Not this little business card sized ID that you want to throw around. It was hard to take this guy seriously because he wanted to brandish this little tiny card that was somehow supposed to impress us. Well, I'll tell you, maybe that impresses some people. And maybe when you're standing in front of a bunch of white people, you have to you have to show them your deeds, as they used to say, right? But that's not the way Native people greet each other. So he automatically sent the wrong signal to us, and needless to say, the conversation didn't go very far. So I go back to this idea. Look, if you, for whatever reason, feel absolutely compelled to pursue federal recognition, just be careful what you wish for. Be careful, because they have that framed in a way. And unlike the vast majority of the 573 federally recognized tribes, who never asked to be recognized with that kind of definition, if you're pursuing it, you kind of are. You can't go in not knowing what FedRec means. That's why the Hawaiians reject it. They reject it for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is seeing the abject poverty that so-called federally recognized tribes are living under. And that sure as hell isn't what they want. They don't want some use of lands held by the federal government for them, trust lands. No, they have lands, and they expect to use their lands and respect their lands, and to force others to respect their lands. That's why we have this Mauna Kea battle going on. That's why we have environmental fights that are going on, all over Turtle Island. So if you need to pursue this, like this group of Lenape who said they needed to do that to distinguish themselves from Cherokee, I'm sorry, not the best option as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I'm not in your shoes, so I can't say you were wrong. But I'll tell you, one of the problems is we're acknowledging the colonial powers and looking to them to validate our existence, or validate our identities. And as they validate our identities, they change the identity, because we no longer are these autonomous, distinct, sovereign peoples. No, you're subordinate. You're subordinate to the laws of the United States, or Canada for that matter. That's what their definition is. So when we ask them to recognize us, if we ask them, then we're not asking them just to recognize us. We're asking them to subjugate us. We're willingly asked. Now, again, I can go through a long list of quote unquote Fed-rect tribes who have never asked for such a thing. And look, I see a lot of people who will say, yeah, well, you can say this and this, but you're a federally recognized tribe, and they'll put somebody down. Look, I got to acknowledge that many places never asked for that. Onondaga may never have asked to be federally recognized as a tribe, band, or nation of Indians subordinate to the laws of the United States. So are they? I think we can make an argument that some of the Haudenosaunee aren't. But consider what Onondaga has done with Oneida and Cayuga, where they actually played the role, claiming to be the seat of the Grand Council, to direct the Interior Department to federally recognize Ray Halbritter, or initially to federally recognize Clint Halftown, and now trying to get their what I call the Heath Chiefs federally recognized. So Onondaga can't play ignorant to what federal recognition is and the fact that they have it if they are part of that process, and if they've played that game. Even if they claim, well, we didn't do it for ourselves. Well, it may be even worse that you did it to others. So I have a major problem with what I hear out of Onondaga, their so-called leadership. I mean, including, as I mentioned a couple of times on the show, when I heard Oren Lyons go out to the NCAI convention and suggest that Native people need to go out and vote in the U.S. elections, and that was at the midterm elections. I've never heard Oren Lyons say that before. I've heard other so-called iconic Native leadership do it. Suzanne Harjo, so many others. I'm in a constant battle with some of these folks, even on the Canadian side, because we got to vote for Justin Trudeau because he's the lesser of two evils between him and Shure. And I'm thinking, that's not our system. If you vote in that system, you're assimilating. And frankly, this pursuit of federal recognition, as it's defined by the United States, it too is assimilation. Now, I realize that sometimes people feel compelled like they have to do it because they're trying to protect lands. But I got to tell you, if I had to pursue federal recognition, the moment I got it, I would make a clear and public announcement that their definition, while they accept that the United States recognizes them, they are clearly disturbed by what the United States thinks they recognize them as. We need to recognize each other. Is my whole point. I mean, if you're a Native entity, if you're a Native person, it shouldn't be up to the federal government to tell other Native peoples who isn't Native. I remember a few years back when Rob Porter was the president of Seneca Nation, he actually tried to pass a resolution or made a declaration, I don't know whatever he did, but executive order, whatever you want to call it, that Seneca licensed wholesalers could not engage with business transactions with non-federally recognized tribes. Yeah, Rob Porter literally told Seneca wholesalers and business people that they were bound by federal recognition standards as to who they could and couldn't do business with, which is really, really absurd I mean, not only at the time would that have included both Puspatuk and Shinnecock, but frankly, it included Gunyonge and a few other territories. It's not up to for the Senate, the president of Sac Nation, to tell its people that they have to be bound by the federal recognition process as far as who they could recognize as Native people is absurd. We need to change how we deal with each other. And again, I'll say what I said earlier in the show. Anybody trying to make the claim that because federal funds are received by this territory or that territory, whether it's for health or whatever it's for, that means that you're not sovereign, then I'm sorry, then you need to try bringing that up to Israel. Try to bring it up to some of these countries that the United States dangles money over. Now, are they compromised? Sure, but to say they're not sovereign is absurd. Because, again, unlike our peoples, who the United States owes a huge debt. Forget about gratitude, because I'm not even asking for that, but they certainly owe us a huge debt. Those Guanacamalli in Hawaii, they are owed a huge debt from what the United States did to them. And every Native people in U.S. and Canada have been screwed over by these colonial powers. Every one of us. And look, without even getting into reparations, and not just reparations for things like residential schools or genocide, but just purely on a land theft basis, the United States has never come close. And when I hear some white politician talk about all the wonderful things they've done for Native people, give me a freaking break. We lead in every category you don't want to lead in. Suicide, substance abuse, unemployment, poverty, death, life expectancy, child mortality, you name it. If it's a category, death by cop, prison population. If there's a category you don't want to lead in, we lead in it. And you know what? These are the federally recognized tribes. So I wanted to expand the thought that I shared on Facebook. And for those of you who have seen my post, by all means, share it. And you know what? Don't just share my words. Make them yours. Tell your story. I mean, add to it. Take from it. And look, if there's parts of it that you don't like, I mean, I'm just saying, let there be a solid Native voice condemning how the United States believes that or what they believe is our identity. We need to define our identity, not let them do it for us. And again, I can't say it any more plainly than that. So again, look, I'm probably going to do a show of some sort on Thursday, but I'll probably do it from my own studio here in our LTN studios in the Cattaraugus Territory of Second Nation. So if you're used to listening or watching us on Facebook or catching our shows on YouTube or our podcast, we will do a Let's Talk show on Thursday. We just won't be doing it from New York, and we'll see what plays out at WBI in New York City as far as whether we still have a show on that station or not. But we'll see that as we go. For now, we'll see you on Thursday and then back here on Saturday. This is John Kane, and this is Let's Talk Native. Yahweh.
Places to go, got people to see.